Hello, everyone, and welcome to the penultimate session of today's CFO Summit, where we will be exploring the latest insights from the 2024 Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand Remuneration Survey Report. That was a mouthful, with Charlotte Evett, General Manager, New Zealand Regions at CA ANZ. Welcome, Charlotte. This report provides a comprehensive look at the remuneration trends, gender pay disparities and their causes, and evolving non-remuneration reward structures within the finance function. So a lot to cover. Charlotte is going to be sharing her key findings, discussing the challenges finance leaders are facing, and offering practical strategies for attracting and retaining top talent in today's economic climate. Now for some introductions. My name is Tori McBride. I am the Senior Marketing Manager at Wheel. If you're not familiar with Wheel, we are the leading spend management solution in Australia, helping finance teams of all shapes and sizes to control spending and streamline their back office admin. Now, before we dive into the discussion, I'm going to have to walk you through a quick bit of housekeeping. First up, I'd like to thank our sponsors. Wheel is the team behind this event, but we couldn't do it without our wonderful sponsors. So a big thank you once again to CFO Magazine, Translucent and Fathom for making today possible. And in case you're only just joining us, here is a quick reminder of the house rules today. We do want this session to be interactive, so please do ask any questions using the Q&A function below. And if you have any comments along the way, please do engage in the chat function, which is also just down below. I'll then try and pose as many questions as I can to Charlotte within today's time frame. So please don't be shy. Ask all your burning questions. All right, now before we dive into the panel discussion, it's time to introduce our expert panelist for today. Charlotte, welcome.
Thanks, Tori. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Would you like to kick us off with an overview of your role at CA ANZ?
Yeah, most certainly. Well, I think before I tell you about my role, let me tell you, for those who aren't familiar with CA ANZ, who we are. So, Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand is the professional membership body for almost 140,000 chartered accountants and finance professionals, predominantly across Australia and New Zealand, but globally as well, because our members do travel, as all of you CFOs would be very aware. So we serve multiple roles. We're an educator, so we develop a lot of relevant content as demanded by our members to help them succeed in their careers. I've just been looking at a really exciting certificate that we're about to launch in Gen AI and finance. In response to our member demand. We're a regulator as well. We're a membership body, so we support our members throughout their careers and connect them as well. And then a public good advocate, so we address important issues like tax and sustainability, education and immigration, and advocate to government and regulators on those topics. In terms of my role personally, I oversee engagement with our 31,000 New Zealand-based members, and I also lead the Chartered Accountants ANZ Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, or DEI team. So our focus is on educating and supporting our members to ensure that the accounting and finance professional is as inclusive and welcoming as it possibly can be to all. So, and that's the segue to the remuneration survey that we're about to talk about. And I guess to give you a bit of context on that, so annually we conduct a member remuneration survey. So it goes out to all of our 140,000 members. So it gathers information on remuneration, as in hard data on that, including monetary and non-monetary remuneration benefits, pay increases, attitudes to pay increases, work practices, flexibility. But importantly, we also explore the gender pay gap. So we use that data to look at the gender pay gap across the accounting profession. And then we take all of that data and we slice and dice it in every which way, including by sector, by geography, years of experience. It's one of our most popular research items because, as you can imagine, everyone wants to know what other people are getting paid or what they could be getting paid, and employers all want to know, if they're hitting the mark or not as well. So that's what I'm here to discuss today.
That's great, Charlotte. Thank you. That was a really good overview. And there's, as you said, a lot to uncover in this report. So I'm really keen to get started. I guess I want to start with with the engagement that you saw this year. The survey this year revealed a 41% increase in respondents to the survey. So it's clear that finance professionals in 2025 are paying extra close attention to these remuneration trends. What are some of the most noticeable shifts that you've seen this year?
Well, Tori, if I may, before I jump into the detail of the shifts, and there were some really interesting ones, I just want to, by way of explanation, say that you'll hear me talking a bit about median remuneration today. And I just want to explain why we talk about median remuneration instead of average remuneration or even just pay. Effectively, it is just pay, but by using median remuneration, and this is really sounding quite techie of me, but it is important, instead of, say, average remuneration, we do that to measure the gender pay gap because it gives a more accurate view and it's more widely representative of the, I guess you'd say, typical earnings. So it minimises the impact of outliers that you'd get with the average remuneration and sort of removes the risk of the data skewing. So that's my disclaimer, and then back to your question. So you're right, we had really high response rate. It was really encouraging this year in our 2024 survey. So as you say, it was up over 40% from the previous year. And I think we could say that most people are pretty interested in remuneration, especially at the moment, but at the best of times, and that's employers and employees, as I said before. But I think that's been exacerbated by a cost of living crisis, as we call it here in New Zealand, and also, a creeping rise in unemployment. But in terms of the major trends, I guess a big one is, and it's a good news story, overall median remuneration for, the almost 9,000 people that responded, which is a fairly decent sample. It grew by 3% overall. So that, I guess, might not sound like much, but this is at a time when a lot of people, their remuneration is flat or dropping. So I think that was a really great news story. And then when we started to unpack that a bit, we saw that part-time employees had the largest increase. So in New Zealand, for example, part-time employees reported a 7% increase in median rem between years. And when we sort of unpack that, I guess it could be due to a number of reasons. One of them could include the demand for flexible working arrangements. So the more demand people have, then it sort of pushes the price up for those sorts of roles. Also, talent retention strategies. So I mean, I've been both a part-time worker and an employer of part-time workers myself. And I could say they're quite often incredibly productive. They get in there, they do what they have to do in the shorter hours. So they're high in demand, and obviously increased demand with limited supply pushes up the price. Also, the recognition of the contribution of part-time employees could have pushed the pay gap, pushed their rem up as well. And I think a lot of organisations would also be looking quite closely at the gender pay gap, especially in Australia, where that reporting is compulsory under the WGEA reporting, and that's been so with a light shone on it, people are making more of an effort to address the gender pay gap. Well, you'd like to think a lot of women are quite often in part-time roles, which could explain why the remuneration has increased there. But other trends in terms of remuneration, it was also our early career members, so those aged sort of 20 to 29, they reported the highest percentage pay increase, with over 40% of them receiving a pay increase of at least 7% or more. So we only asked about sort of 7% or more. We didn't say, 10% or 30% or 50%. So some of them no doubt received some really decent pay increases, but at least 40% of them received a pay increase of 7% or more. What was really interesting, though, was that they were the least satisfied group when we asked about attitudes and expectations of pay rises. So over 40% of those that did receive that pay rise, they were actually expecting more, which was interesting, and great that their expectations were high. In comparison, almost 70% of the next age group up, if you like, the 30 to 39-year-olds, they were happy with their pay increase. And then getting up towards 80%, the exact number was 78% of those aged 60 or more were actually quite satisfied with their pay rises. So I guess what we could take from this and the findings in this year's survey consistent with previous years also, is that satisfaction with pay and pay increases tends to increase with age. The other, I guess, the most notable finding in the survey this year, and there were many, so it was hard to pick the top three, but unequivocally, flexible working is still incredibly highly valued by our members. And I would hazard a guess that this is representative of not just our members, not just accounting and finance professionals, but employees across many or most other sectors and professions. So more than 2/3 of our respondents, like 68%, told us that flexible working is their most valued non-remuneration employment benefit. So, I mean, I think that's really interesting, but it didn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear kind of what those top priorities are that make up that, ideal remuneration package for, depending on your needs and your age bracket, your experience. How do you think finance leaders and employers in general should be, balancing these ideas of the perfect remuneration package with, as you mentioned, a cost of living crisis, economic constraints, budgets? Do you have any advice for finance leaders today?
Look, absolutely. I think, as you point out, I mean, I think there are always economic constraints. There are very few organisations or employers that are happy just to, take the lid off and pay an unlimited amount in terms of remuneration. Managing costs is always important, and often REM is one of those big ticket items in terms of, the expenses that go out in the P&L. I would suggest, and many organisations already do this, but, mark to market, to use an accounting term. So undertake regular, at least annual, I would suggest, external benchmarking to ensure that what you offer in terms of remuneration remains competitive. Because with the range of online tools, I'm thinking of seek.com.au or .co.nz, and there are many other tools out there. You can bet your bottom dollar that your employees are marking themselves to market, so you need to make sure you are as well. And I think the next step after that, because you may not always be able to necessarily match or equal what your competitor is going to pay, but there are many, many non-remuneration benefits that come with little or no financial outlay that are really valued very highly by employees, and that's what we found in the survey. And I touched on that earlier, but flexible working is a really key one. It's really straightforward, and I know there are lots of different attitudes around this. I know pretty much every organisation now would probably say that they offer flexible working, but it's about genuinely offering that and making it an environment where flexible working is the norm. It has to fit with your business, of course, but I mean, that's a really key non-remuneration benefit that doesn't have to cost you anything and gets incredible employee loyalty off the back of it. So as I said earlier, 68% of our respondents said it was their most highly valued non-cash remuneration factor. And then we broke it down. I said we sliced and diced our survey in every which way. So when we broke it down further by gender, 77% of women said that they really valued flexible start and finish times, and 71% the ability to work from home. So that was compared to 60 and 52% of men respectively for those same two factors. So it was valued by both genders, but by women primarily, up in those high 70s. And that would be because women often have those caring responsibilities for children and for family as well. So if they can drop their children off at school, still, head to work and, put in a very solid day, bringing their huge brains to the table and solving all sorts of the most complex financial and other issues out there, and then have a flexible finish time as well, or, one or the other, if they can work from home. That really is a benefit to them that in many cases would more than make up for not getting, the tip-top remuneration rate. So it's about getting that balance right. I'm just thinking through our members. We do a lot of work around the gender pay gap, as I said, in our DEI team. But one of the resources and tools that we provide to support our members in helping to close that gender pay gap is our gender pay gap playbook. So that's on our website, but really It just goes through a lot of case studies and examples and practical tools on things employers can do that you don't have to be in the accounting or finance sector to help close your gender pay gap. We did a case study, and it was actually on a New Zealand accounting firm. They operate in a regional area here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and they were really struggling to find and recruit and retain top talent. So a couple of the partners, incredibly innovative, and this was before it was a thing, decided to offer a compressed workday. So they would continue to pay their team full-time remuneration, but their rules or their requirements were that everyone needed to be in the office working between the hours of 9 to 3. So they were still paying a full salary. So, the 4-day work week's become more popular now, although it hasn't taken off sort of holistically. But what this firm, but that wasn't the case at this time. Now, what this firm found was with these decreased hours, so instead of having everyone there from, 8:30 till 5 or whenever, 9 to 3 were their core working hours, and there was no mucking around or getting coffees when they were there. People, and, they were social with each other, but they got their work done between 9 and 3. They were very productive hours, but they found with that reduced work week, productivity and profitability didn't just stay, it didn't drop off, it didn't stay flat, it actually increased. And in terms of talent, they went from really struggling to get the top talent in the door to actually now they have a waiting list for people that want to work from them that come from far and wide. So really helped in terms of attracting top talent. They didn't have to pay any more out in terms of their salaries, but that's one of those sort of non-remuneration factors that you can offer in your own way as an employer to attract and retain top talent. In our survey, we also found that access to meaningful work was really important and across both genders as well. So 64% of women and 61% of men, I think the numbers were, rated this really highly. So making sure that your team have some really decent work to get stuck into as well. Is another something that doesn't cost you extra, but that's a way that you can attract and retain people. We also found that there were really clear and distinct generational preferences for non-rem benefits. So, ages and stages, and I've mentioned gender already, make a big difference. So, for example, 20 to 29-year-olds, that group I said before that got the biggest pay rise and they were the most dissatisfied with it, their top valued non-remuneration benefit is career progression. So they wanted to know, what is my pathway? How can I move up? When can I move up? So being very clear with people that you take on and that generational group about the next steps for them and how they can move up and what they need to do, that actually ranked really highly for them. And then the group of workers over 50, meaningful work. So actually doing something that makes a difference that they perceived was meaningful and mattered to them. That was really, really important too. So you have to adjust what you're doing based on, the demographic that you're dealing with. Lots of factors and lots of levers that you can pull there. Something else, while I remember actually, Tori, that our younger members said, so that 20 to 29 age group, learning and development. So having access to learning and development, lifelong learning is very important across all career stages, but this younger group, we're really focused on that. So there's some food for thought. There are many different levers you can play with, as I said, but it doesn't have to always be just about the money.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear what those kind of competing priorities are. It just goes to show that, there isn't one package that looks the same for everyone. People are really prioritizing different things depending on their stage. I just wanted to jump back a little bit. I know you touched on platforms like Seek and benchmarking. We know that from the survey, over half the people surveyed supported this notion of greater pay transparency. I just wanted to get your take on how CFOs should be addressing that. It can be difficult depending on business, depending on, what C-suites are willing to share with their employees. What's your take on pay transparency?
Yeah, so as you point out, over half of the respondents to our survey, so I think the number was 53%, expressed a desire for greater pay transparency, such as having access to pay scales and salary bands. And I would highlight that the sentiment was particularly strong amongst those that acknowledge the gender pay gap. So there actually are there are people that don't even acknowledge there's a gender pay gap, and that tends to be higher amongst men than women. But I digress. So in terms of pay transparency, I think it's a really important tool for addressing pay disparities, but it can also be used for the good to foster trust and engagement within the workforce. So I think when employees have a really clear understanding of how their rem compares to their peer and colleagues, it can lead to increased job satisfaction and motivation. I guess there's a flip side to that as well, because you're not always going to come up favourable or the same, and there'll be often good reasons for that. So it can, if not treated carefully, be a demotivator. But in terms of closing the gender pay gap, absolutely, transparency can help mitigate unconscious bias in pay decisions. So it can lead to fairer outcomes, and especially, when it comes to women as well. But I would say it can also be used as a talent attraction tool. So it can enhance an organization's reputation for being, in an environment. I think if you go back, you mentioned Seek. So if you go to Seek and sort of scroll through and have a look at the jobs on offer there, it's not that common or not as common. More organisations wouldn't disclose the pay bands they're offering than would. So I could say that's definitely a talent, an attraction tool where it could, an organisation is going to transparently promote their pay band. It can set them apart from other organisations. I guess in terms of women, and something we need to be aware of is that they might see a pay band for a job that they'd actually be more than qualified for and go, oh, no, that's paying way more than I'm getting now, so I'm not even going to bother because I wouldn't be good enough. So there's that factor to think of as well. But yeah, I think I'm hugely supportive of pay transparency in terms of a tool to close the gender pay gap.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. I really do want to dive into the gender pay gap now. I'm so interested to hear about those trends that emerged. We know that from the survey that the pay gap, sadly, is still prevalent in the Australia and New Zealand regions. I think from what I've got here in my notes, it's sitting at around 18% in Australia and 22% in New Zealand. What are some of the biggest contributors to this persistent disparity?
Really stubborn pay gap that has not really seemed to have closed in much in our industry for a really long time, and we're not alone there. I was reading about the similar kind of pay gaps across the legal profession, and so the gender pay gap, for those that aren't aware, is it's not the same. It's not paying. I take a step back. A lot of people say to me, oh, we haven't got a gender pay gap in our organisation, or, we pay equal for the same role. I take on grads, for example, and I pay the men grads the same as the women grads. And so there's no gender pay gap. There's nothing to see here. And I would say to them, actually, that's equal pay for equal work. And that has been the law. It was legislated back in the 70s. So to not pay equal pay for equal work is illegal. That is not the gender pay gap. The gender pay gap is the difference between the average or median, whichever measure you use, pay for men in an organisation or an industry or a workforce, and then the same pay for women. You're taking that difference and you're putting it over the average or median pay for men, and it comes out as a percentage. That's the gender pay gap. And statistics don't lie. We measured it across our profession, 18% in Australia and 22% in New Zealand. And why do we have a gender pay gap? Well, I would say it's due to a combination of factors, and it's complex, but it includes, primarily women being underrepresented in more senior and high-paying roles. And also the impact of career breaks for childcare. So if it's okay with you, Tori, I'll just take a minute to unpack these and maybe a couple more factors as well. So in terms of the underrepresentation of women in senior leadership roles, so senior leadership roles are more often than not higher paying. Women are underrepresented in these roles. It's pretty clear in the data. For example, in our survey, we found that women only hold 23% of equity partnerships in public practice, so that's in accounting firms in Australia, and 38% in New Zealand. This disparity in senior roles, and I would say it would be the same across CFOs, in the corporate sector and, in the government sector as well. It's the same on boards, unfortunately. So these more senior roles pay significantly more. And so when you're looking at that gender pay gap measurement that I talked to you about before, if you have a lot more women in the junior roles that pay less, then those numbers are very clearly, when you crunch them, remember the difference between average or median men's rem, you take off average and median women's rem and you put that over men's rem, and that's how you end up with the gender pay gap. So certainly a lot less women in those senior higher paying roles. Also, and these two are interconnected, they're certainly not standalone, career breaks and childcare responsibilities. So women, and our survey backs this up as well, women are more likely to take a career break than their male counterparts, and their career breaks will be longer, and they're more likely to be used for caring for children, which often impacts their career progression and earnings. So in contrast, men typically are less likely to take a career break. When they do, it's shorter. And our data found it was primarily for travel as opposed to for caring for children. So 21% of men reported taking a career break and 48% of them used it to travel. In comparison, 49% of women reported taking a notable career break, and 3/4 of them reported taking it to care for their children. So the difference is stark. You can see there, that's the data. Women are also 3 times more likely than men to report that their career break severely impacted their professional trajectory. So, there you go. That's the data. And then I guess another factor that I would say contributes to the gender pay gap is bias. We live in a world where there is still bias, both unconscious, so people don't knowingly go out to do it, but it's sort of built into us, and systemic bias as well. And they were identified by our members as another top contributing factor to the gender pay gap. So that includes biases in hiring and promotion, pay decisions, all things that sort of compound together and more often than not disadvantage women.
Wow, there's a whole system of structures still in place that, are contributing to this. How would you recommend that businesses, start to tackle this? There isn't one obvious way, but, let's take, for example, diversity of representation in finance roles, particularly leadership roles. What are some of the ways that finance leaders can encourage more diversity?
Well, in terms of increasing the number of women in these senior leadership roles in finance, which we identified in the survey and which I spoke about before was a contributor to the gender pay gap. I would say mentorship and sponsorship and allyship by men as well, especially. These sorts of programs and initiatives are really crucial in helping to get women into the more senior roles. So, thinking of mentorship, these sorts of programs and initiatives, it could be, a male leader or a woman leader, a man or a woman leader saying to their to the person that reports to them, who happens to be a woman, look, like I think it would be great for you to have a mentor, and I can think of this person within the organization or this person externally that would be good to, help you along and talk about their own experiences. And they can provide women with the guidance and support and opportunities that they need to advance their careers. All the stories like, yeah, look, I've been there too, and I understand how that is. This is what I did, and it didn't work so well. I would try this thing that's different, or this is what I did, it worked really well, and why don't you do that? Or they can introduce them to other people. Mentors can offer some really valuable advice and help women navigate the challenges of the accounting and finance industry. And then sponsors can advocate them and really help for them to gain visibility and access to leadership roles. I mean, I can think of sponsors, a couple who have been quite key in my career. They've been male sponsors who have really advocated for me at that top table when I haven't been there, and have made a significant difference to my career. I think at Chartered Accountants Australia New Zealand, for our membership, we offer a program called CA Career Mentors, which is really loved by our members. It's incredibly popular and of particular interest to women. We have a return to work stream. So that's where we pair up an often very senior, experienced, often woman mentor with a person who's returning to work, and more often not women as well, after one of those career breaks we spoke about before. So we pair them up. The mentor program's for 6 months, but it quite often, can build into a career-long relationship or friendship. And we have they mentor the person returning to work as they return and transition back into the workforce, and that can make a huge difference to a woman's career. So that's one. Secondly, I think we've spoken about flexibility, but really having those flexible career pathways, I think, is essential to helping women get to that top table, whether it's the C-suite or senior leadership roles. So, many women, as we spoke about before, 48% of our members reported taking a career break for parental leave or other caring responsibilities. And to be completely honest with you, they perceive, and I think it's well documented, that can really hinder career progression. Many of our survey respondents perceived the career break negatively impacted their career, at least for a period of time. So organisations, I think, it's incumbent upon them to really support women who do take a career break by offering flexible career pathways, not a one-size-fits-all, that normalises a return to work. It also normalises part-time work, even in those very senior roles. And I think by broadening out, parental leave to include men and not just the primary carer as well, and normalising career breaks amongst men helps as well, women. So it's not just women that do it, it's men that do it as well, and it's normalised across both genders. And then there's the obvious one that, well, maybe not so obvious to every organisation, but leadership development initiatives. So, and going out and specifically targeting women, because that can make a really big difference. So they can help build skills and confidence where they might be lacking, that women need to take on those leadership roles. So training programs, workshops, networking opportunities that you might not have on, Friday night at 7 o'clock, knowing full well that many women, if they work part-time, may not work Fridays, and also the evenings might not be so great for them in terms of getting home if they do have those carer responsibilities. So putting them at the appropriate time on the appropriate days, and designing them to really empower women and prepare them for leadership positions. I think also more informal initiatives such as shoulder tapping women who haven't put their hand up for leadership opportunities, because many of us have heard that story where a job will be advertised, and this is a generalization, it doesn't happen in all cases, but often a role will be advertised, and a man who might have 2 of the 10 required competencies will go, oh, how hard can it be? I'm going to put my hat in the ring and I'll do that. Whereas the woman might have 7 out of 10 and go, oh no, I don't have those last 3, so I'm not even going to try. So I think if we watch out for really high potential women that we could see being in the role, they might not be 100% there, but really counselling them and giving them a shoulder tap and saying, hey, I think you should apply for that role. Why haven't you applied for that role? Being respectful of their reasons not to, the same as with anyone, but just giving them a tap on the shoulder. Also, as I mentioned earlier, pay transparency is another critical factor. So ensuring that scales and salary bands are transparent. Organisations can help really keep an eye on those pay disparities and promote fairness, which can help build trust and manage expectations amongst employees. And then I would say last, I mentioned bias. So systemic bias, it is a thing. So we need to address it in organisations in order to ensure that women make their way up to the leadership roles and we have a more equal balance. So that's watching out for and putting processes in place in terms of hiring, promotion and pay practices. So really practical things. For example, like instead of just having an all male recruitment panel, make sure you have mixed gender recruitment panels. Instead of just having people that go in and go, he, she, or they gave me a good vibe. I feel like I can relate to them because they're the same as me. We all like people that are the same as us. Generally, I think that's the way human beings work. Actually having a standard scoring practice so that you can go through and mark them, and then you're comparing the mark. This candidate was 7 out of 10 on this particular criteria, 8 on that. They're the most highly scoring candidate versus this candidate over here who, was like me. We both like sport and all the rest, but they didn't score quite so highly. So you've got something, really objective that you can look at that helps to remove bias also. So sorry, went on a bit long there. It's something very dear to my heart, but there's some of the many tools that leaders and organisations can put in place to help get women up to that top table and even out that split.
That was great, Charlotte. I think we touched on so much there: allyship, mentorship, unconscious bias. There are so many factors that are still contributing to this, and still so many tools that modern businesses should be employing when they're looking to attract top talent, which leads me nicely into our kind of next topic, which is this idea of how do we get the best people from a diverse range of backgrounds into our roles, into our business. And I think what we saw in the report was that there is this shift, towards these more holistic looking packages, which look different for everyone. Can you, I guess, give some advice for businesses that are potentially trying to cater to all of these different people? And how do they go about tailoring each of these packages to attract top talent?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, and the $10,000 question or $1 million question. But I think taking some of everything that I've mentioned until this point now and bring it all together is the way that you would attract the very top talent. So having a really comprehensive benefits package. So it's a given that you'll pay market salary if you can. So make sure that you've researched what that market salary is, like I say, mark to market. And offer the best salary that you possibly can. Also, work-life balance, career growth, things I've touched on before. So you might want to add to make your package more attractive, other non-remuneration factors apart from, just salary. So that might be health and life insurance that a lot of organisations offer. Some sort of pension plan, paying higher super in Australia or KiwiSaver in New Zealand over and above the minimum amount. Flexible working arrangements, because not only does that give the employee the work-life balance that they may or may not be after, but it also helps them to feel autonomous and like, they're managing their own life. Because quite often we take work home with us in the evenings, but that makes that line between work and, life quite blurred. So empower people to deliver on their outputs and work flexibly when it works for your business. Obviously, it has to work for the organisation and the person as well. It's not just a one-way thing, which I think employees can sometimes forget and get a little bit sort of, oh, what do you mean I have to come to the office today? It's like, well, no, you do, because it's work and, that you're paid to work. So it has to work for the organisation, for the employer and the employee. And then also, I mentioned earlier, professional development opportunities, giving people, and they don't have to cost a fortune. You don't have to send someone to a 12-week course in Harvard necessarily, but there are all sorts of different ways you can skin the cat in terms of giving employees access to professional development. There's so much content online. It might just be making the time available for them. For example, members of Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand get complimentary access to LinkedIn Learning, which is an amazing platform with, there's nothing that you couldn't learn on there. You can improve your public speaking, you could improve your Excel skills, you could become a master coder, but just giving them the space and the access to those professional development opportunities. I mentioned also career development. So that is about actually it's explicitly stating and communicating to employees the really clear career path that they have, and how the learning opportunities you're giving could support them into that. So employees really value employers that invest in them and then show them a pathway. And I said before, our younger members said that that was their number one valued non-remuneration benefit, out of any of them, was having a clear career path. But, people of all ages and stages value that, knowing that actually this isn't it. Like, if you think this is as high as I can go at this organisation, there is no pathway for me because no one ever leaves and I can't see myself jumping from there to there, then if you are someone that's even slightly career motivated, or maybe remuneration is your motivator and you want to get more money, then you will look and go elsewhere. And then as an employer, you're going to have to invest a lot of money into recruiting someone new, and then the downtime it takes for them to get up to speed. So it's better to invest in the people you've got, the good people that you've got, and show them a pathway, or make a pathway for them, or give them some projects that help them grow their skills. But you need to communicate this with them. Don't just expect them to know it, and don't ignore it, or it will often come and bite you. Another one I think that we can overlook as employers, but is incredibly important, is just your branding as an organization and your company culture. So your biggest, your biggest way of marketing your organization is through the employees that you currently have. So if you invest time and effort into cultivating a really positive and inclusive workplace culture, and that comes with having a diverse workforce and a diverse thinking workforce as well, really collaborative and supportive teamwork environment, then other people will hear about it. And because people ask around when they're interviewing for a role, like, what's it like to work here, or what's that particular boss like, or whatever. And through word of mouth, they'll hear about your fantastic culture, and that will be a real impetus for them wanting to come and work for you. Something that I actually haven't mentioned before either, that isn't an actual outlay, is giving, but a real talent attractor, is just offering maybe the standard mandated number of weeks for leave is 4 weeks, and offering 6 weeks. That's going to be another way that you can attract people just with those little tools, and that will help improve your company culture as well. A couple more, just, recognition and awards, and it might be sort of an incentive system and or a bonus structure. Branding your organization, everyone wants to work for Google, for example. They're, a cool employer. So think about your brand as an employer. And part of what feeds into that as well is investing in technology and innovation. If it's hard to get things done at your organization, that'll get out to the marketplace. But if you're tech savvy and you've got some of the coolest tools and gadgets, which also help to get the job done, well, that will make you more attractive as an employer as well. So, all those things put together can actually make a really big difference, and they're not all just about what you pay. That's just one part of it.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great note to end on, investing in the current team you have, and, understanding that that is the best way to attract top talent, is to really, understand what motivates your current team. So lots to unpack there, lots to think about. Thank you so much, Charlotte. We are out of time for today's session, but thank you to everyone at home for tuning in. We do have one more session today, which is kicking off at 3 p.m. Sydney time, so in about 15 minutes. And that will be on finance's role in sustainability, how to turn reporting requirements into business impact. So you won't want to miss it. Charlotte, thank you again. And we'll see you over there in the next few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tori. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.